Hello and welcome to Gun Academy. This is Unseen Killer, and we are going to cover how to use Blender to texture STLs, specifically for firearms. We're going to be starting off with the ADHD version because, let's be honest, most of us are super impatient. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through from just recently opening up Blender to having a completed firearm textured and exported and ready to print. After that, which is only going to be a couple minutes, we're going to then flip over to like the full explanation for all the other shit you would want to know about, but this is going to be the easy one. So when you open up Blender, click off the screen, zoom out some with your mouse, hit delete. Just a fair warning, this is a texturing class, not a Blender class, so I am using a space mouse. If you want to figure out how to maneuver in Blender, I recommend watching another video, so I'm sorry if I'm going to be moving around different than you would. My apologies there. I recommend opening up the View tab, tossing a 0 in here, and being able to see a little bit further out. Grab that little arrow, throw it back in, File, Import, STL, and go to find all of your different projects and files and stuff. Tonight, I'm going to be working on, let's do an easy one. Let's just do the original Black Pawn. Black Pawn, STL. We're going to go to the blank. Did I not even leave a blank in here? I'm so sorry, guys. I'm the worst. Go back out of here. Go to the new Black Pawn, which I know has a blank in it. Black Pawn L, STL, blank. All right, it's loading in. All right, here we go. She is. So I'm getting an absolute view, hit R, rotate it 90 degrees, hit enter. Now we've got our model. First thing you want to do, see that it does not have enough resolution for you to texture. Right. So what we're going to do then is we're going to go to sculpt mode. I've done a lot of trial and error, so just trust that 0.18, enter, and then clicking on remesh works. Keep your eye down here where it says verts faces. So we're at 113,000 faces. So we're going to click on remesh. And you'll see it just jump up to 2,100,000 faces. All right, we are good to go. Let's take a look at the edit mode again. In edit mode, I recommend clicking on this third button for face select, because then you'll be able to actually see your faces. And you see that we have far more resolution to utilize. So I'm going to go over to the vertex group, which is the green triangle here. We're going to hit plus. We're going to call it the grip. And then all we're going to do, we're going to open this guy up. See, you have the box selection here. I'm just going to select a couple things. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and then select more things. Because if I don't select with the shift key, the previous selections go away. I always recommend throwing a couple on these top edges. For some reason, the select linked flat faces doesn't like getting those pieces, so I like to manually designate those. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Alrighty. And same thing on the front. Thanks. Now I'm choosing this one in particular because it has a complexity to it that I feel is going to create a lot of questions if I don't touch on it at least once. So there is an aspect to this I'm going to mention here in a second. So I found this button, select linked flat faces, and it does like 90% of the work. I'm going to select all this shit manually. There is a way to do this in the menu, but I don't like using the menu, so I'm about to use it once in the menu so you can see it if you're not listening to me, because you just want to watch me do this. But if you go to select and go to more and click on that, it'll increase everything around it by 1. So we're going to hit Control plus, Control plus, Control plus. That's 3 of them, plus the one we did in the menu, so that's 4. So we're going to do Control minus, 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 and minus. After that, I'm probably going to switch my selection tool over to circle select by holding click on that guy, bringing this radius up some. I'm just going to get a couple more. Not that I need to. At this point, we're already way overkill on what a printer resolution can do, but it helps. Now, if you end up accidentally selecting something you didn't mean to select, holding down the control key is how you unselect things. There we go. Here's a couple more pieces we can hit. Let's zoom out. That's fine. Okie dokie. We're about done with the selection part of this party. Yeah, that's honestly plenty. Cool. Okay, so in this grip one, you have to hit the button for assign. You can check that by clicking off and hitting select again. You'll notice when we zoom out, you can see through the gun some. So you'll want to get in there and make sure that nothing is yellow and accidentally got assigned. And we're good. Now, this will not unwrap correctly because it has a perfect circle. There's nothing for it to obviously unwrap. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the select box, go to the front, and right where we want the texturing to be somewhat imperfect, we're going to drop the teeniest, tiniest little line. We're going to make sure that it's only one box thick, and it is. We're going to go to UV. We're going to mark a seam, and then we're going to go to select our thingy again. I'm going to open up this project. You don't have to do this part. This is just so you guys can see it happen. I'm going to flip this guy over to UV editor so you can see it when it pops up. Don't have to do that. Don't have to learn that. Just the thing for seeing it better. We're going to go ahead and do the unwrap. This is going through, using that seam as a starting point. It's going to open up this whole fucking grip section into a two-dimensional mapping over here. That way it knows how to apply the textures the way we want it to. Yeah, I fought the urge to put seams in or not in the ADHD friendly version. You don't have to use a seam if you don't have any perfect circles. This went all the way around the grip, which is a perfect circle. So you have to have the seam, otherwise your seam's gonna start like up at the top and it's gonna flower out along the bottom and look like this really weird knurling pattern that just doesn't make sense. I also want to call out that it is still unwrapping. I do have quite a powerful computer, and it still is going to take that long. So, 12th Gen i9, RTX 4070 Ti, 64 gigs of DDR5. Like, it's gonna take a while unless your shit's way overpowered. It doesn't take a while for smaller grip sections. It will take a while for big, huge ones like this that have not only unwraps, but seams. I also like to open up this UV editor. You see this big, bright orange unwrap of it when it's done. You get to see the fruits of our. I'm also sorry for anybody that's actually listening to me talk on the recording right now because I do not have the energy to go back and edit this again. So you did have to hear some white space. Sorry. I don't know why. Whenever you have seams, you are going to have this goofy little line. That is the seam. It's like the seam in a weird place. But this is exactly what you should see. You're going to have a weird vertical line that you're free to ignore, and everything else looks like a nice spread open orange peel, right? All right, so we're going to close this area. This is good to go. That was done correctly. We're going to flip over to object mode, and we're ready to start doing the fun, easy part. Honestly, like, the hard part is now officially over. We're going to click on the blue wrench. We're going to add a modifier. Deform. Displace. We're going to make a new texture here. So we're going to call this the grip displace. We're going to call this the, I don't know, topo texture. The grip topo texture. And we're going to do UV map, grip. All right, so now with this displace, we have the ability to affect only that one area, right? So we're going to go over to the textures menu. We're going to go to open. I'm going to go to my textures folder. You can apply any PNG or bitmap or JPEG that your heart desires. Where is she? One of them. I had a better one than that. I'm just gonna type in topo. Yeah, all right. Well, I guess we're using that one. That's fine. All right. So I had it on 0. That's what. So it's really important that when you're deciding how much texture to give stuff, you go inside the model. You can always zoom in and see inside of a model. Make sure that you're not cutting too close to like your edges and stuff. As you change your strengths, as you can see, even just looking inside of it here, you can really break stuff. So keep your eyes on it, make sure it's good, and if you can't get it good, change your mid-level. Start with an extreme mid-level in one way or the other. Extreme mid-levels allow you to add material to the exterior without ever compromising the interior like at all. On the contrary, it makes more space. Makes it very thick. So that's texturing. There's many different tools we're going to cover in this video that go into all the different stuff you can do with it. From there, if it's too big or too small, you can change the number of repeats. That's going to be awful. I'll bring that back down. We're going to say that we love this and pretend that it's perfect. You can see your seam right here, that it doesn't perfectly line up. Nobody really focuses on that because the rest of it is perfect and beautiful. So we're ready to go ahead and export this. So go to this wrench, add another modifier, generate and decimate. You're going to now type in the exact same thing you did for your remesh. So 0.18, hit enter, and your shit's going to freeze again. That's expected. It's going through and it's redoing all the math. You can keep your eyes down here. 4,240,000 tries, 2 million faces. If you watch those numbers, they will drop once the decimation is complete. There we go. It's complete. If you don't see that, right-click this bar and check the boxes for whatever you need. This is ready to export. File, export. STL. Desktop. Black Pawn L Topo, I guess. Save, export, minimize. Alrighty. And we're done. We have texture to frame. It is ready to print. It is geometrically accurate, and we have texture. Woohoo. Congrats to the winners. Now, that is your ADHD version. We apply the texture. If you don't have wraparounds, you don't have to do seams, but you do have to do the rest of it. That's all we're doing for the ADHD version. We're about to go ahead and blow that all away and do this correctly and do a bunch of stuff. So, let's get started on the more fun, nuanced parts of it. I'm going to go through a couple different frames, a couple different applications of it. However, some of it's going to be repeats, but not much of it. Every repeat I do is going to be for a different reason with a different end goal. The thinking here is you have a thing. You want that thing to be textured. You also might want that to be textured in several different ways, but you're also particular about your textures. Let's say, for example, you had, I don't know, a Hawaiian shirt floral pattern, right? Maybe you don't want your flowers to be 2 millimeters small. Maybe you don't want it to be one gigantic leaf wrapped around the entire thing. You want to have the flexibility to put a bunch of textures on a bunch of stuff, and you also want to be able to control where it is on the model, how big it is, how many times it repeats, how much it sticks out, how much it goes in, all that other shit. So let's go ahead and let's bring a model in. I'm probably not going to use the black pawn, honestly, because of that wraparound one. I don't want to have to do a seam every single time. I think that the best one we ever did was the Glock 26X that I had, just because it was like a front and a back. Although the Bishop, now that I'm thinking about it, is probably going to have a nice front and a back easy one. Let's try that one. Let's do the Bishop short smooth. Yeah, that's probably going to be the easiest one for us because it's just got a front and a back. So R90, enter. G, move it to center. Rotate. G, move it to center. You don't have to do that. It just helps me to navigate. All right, so let's do it again. Fresh in, we're going to set our vertex groups. We're going to talk about face selections and when it works, when it's appropriate to apply facial selections in different ways. There's several tools you can use, and there's several reasons to use them. Some of them help, some of them hurt. If you just sat through my ADHD version, you saw that you don't really have to give much of a fuck to get most of it done. Sometimes you might want to. I would urge caution. These are 3D printers. These are not selective laser sintering. These are meant for lower resolution manufacturing. So don't beat yourself up over the teeniest, tiniest extra faces being selected. So, got our face in here. Got our body in here. We're going to go to the object mode and flip it over to edit mode. We're going to take a look at our faces. As we can see, we've got some halfway decent resolution on the back, terrible resolution on the front, and then epic resolution on the corners. All in all, it's just not, you'll never have one open up the way you want it to. That's okay. So we're going to go over to our sculpt mode. Type in 0.18. Again, I did a lot of trial and error with this. 0.16 also worked. 0.1 also worked. The lower the number to 0, the closer it gets to 0, the more resolution you're going to have. Which honestly, after a certain point, gets to be untenable. It's too many faces. It's too much data. 0.1 exported without a decimation, for example, was like a 900 megabyte single Glock STL with a basic texture. Like, it's unusable. So 0.18, after a lot of trial and error, I found was like a pretty sweet spot. You can go to 0.17, 0.16. After that, dude, good luck. The file sizes just get to be too big. Anyway, once you type in the number, hit the remesh button, catch your numbers down here, make sure they increase, and they did. And we want to visually confirm that. If you didn't catch it in the ADHD friendly version, the selection modes here, these don't only affect what you see, they affect how you select things. So this is vertex selection. It looks like it's all black, but when we zoom all the way in, what you're selecting is vertexes and not faces. So if you get in there, you can see that the lines are somewhat selected and they gradient out to black because this vertex is what's being selected. There's a use case for that. It doesn't really come up here with what we're doing. Same over here. You have edge selection, which is what it sounds like. You're selecting a bunch of edges. They look like faces. They're not. You can have broken lines here that don't actually select a face. I recommend face selection because the thing that actually is the model, which is faces, is what you're choosing what to and not to apply to. So what we're going to do is we're going to designate a whole bunch of faces that we want to select on the front, and then assign them, and then on the back, and then assign them, and then wrap them. So we're going to go to this vertex group icon here, this little green triangle on the right side. We're going to hit add and add. This one's going to be the front. Click. This one's going to be the back. Enter. All right, so let's do the front first. I'm going to click on that. Goes to the. We're going to make a couple selections on each side, making sure that we have at least some selections on any of the largest flat faces you can see. That will make a lot of sense here in a minute. As well, you would be wise to, using the square selection tool, edge this all the way up to where you actually want it to end. And the same thing along the bottom. Tell it where you want it to stop. I recommend not going into the crevices, not going around the edge. There is reason for that, and it's just mostly because I've tried applying texture. When we get to the texturing part, if you think about it, everything you spill off to the edge is going to apply texture to it. And when it applies texture to it, it tries to shoot it out into space with these weird little, like, fractaled off pieces of it. It's just not what people want. They want it to be flat. So for that same reason, you might want to, avoid putting fillets on your platforms like I did here foolishly. So anyway, once you get a couple of these basic selections done, I found this button, select linked flat faces, and it goes through and it hits everything that it considers to be, air quotes, flat from what you see. Before I do any corrections, you're going to see these little rashes of missing texture, or missing faces here. Hitting the select more or less more, which is, I'll say it, it's going to be Control plus on my number pad. It does an addition of everything around it, but it does it with everything. Now, instead of undoing, Control minus, the same number, does a subtraction of the exterior of your selection, meaning it won't undo what you did in the middle. It'll only undo what you see on the exterior, meaning I have the least amount of cleanup possible here afterwards. All right, so honestly, you could get away with just doing the box selection tool for a model like this, because I have so few things to clean up. We're about done with this one. I'll do a couple just to illustrate the point, but I also want to remind you that I'm not letting the selection come over the edge over here. It's all along this nice flat piece, intentionally so. So I'm going to hit the assign button over here in the vertex group. That way when I click off and I unselect it, if I hit the select button, it should pop back up, and it does. So now we're going to go to the back one, and we're going to do the exact same thing again. Zoom out, zoom in. We're going to grab the bottom edge of flat. Do the same thing along the top. We just have to decide in our hearts what we think is the correct end of the or the beginning, I guess, of the curvature. It's an art form. It's you know, it's a personal opinion. It's not something that you can be absolutely right or wrong about. This is all subjective, so don't lose sleep over it. With big pieces like this, you might be wise to drop a selection on this. People who are on laptops or have less powerful GPUs, that selection I just did will crash your shit. Did this earlier this morning on my laptop downstairs, gaming laptop with a RTX 40, I don't know, 4050 or something, would not do that many selections at once, even if it was a clean selection. So anyway, select linked flat faces, and look at that. It does like almost all the work for us. Same as before, we're going to counter control pluses and minuses. Control plus 1. It looks like it got it. We'll do another one just for posterity. 2. And we'll go minus 1, minus 2. That's control minus and control plus. It only works on the number pad, plus and minus. Alrighty. I'm going to go ahead and call that one good to go. Taking a look at these circles, making sure they're fine. Look at the interior. Nothing unnecessary got selected. We'll go ahead and hit assign. So we're going to go to UV and unwrap. We're going to unwrap the rear one first because it's selected. Once it's done unwrapping, I'm going to unselect it, and I'm going to select the front one, and we're going to unwrap it as well. Now, if you remember from the ADHD version, that other workspace that I opened, you don't have to do that ever. It's a good indicator of what actually is inside of your UV map. So if you accidentally selected like a random square over here or some shit, it'll fuck up your UV map like crazy. So if I hold my mouse over here to this little plus icon, I drag it over, and I hit this little top left icon, and I go to UV editor, that's exactly what I wanted to see. That unwrapped it perfectly. Same thing over here. So we're going to go to the front, hit select. You'll see I have no UV map. I go to UV and unwrap, and sit there and think about it for a minute. When it's done, it's going to show me what the unwrap looks like. Very quick, very easy one. And it's exactly what we hope to see, all the different pieces and parts. We have a tall part over here and a short part over here, which would explain this being off some. So that's perfect. I'm gonna right click on this gray space, go to close. We're good to go. We're on to the fun parts now. So there's a couple different textures we're going to try, and a couple different nuances that pertain to why they don't just work on like a batch application of here's my frame, program out 20 different textures for me, because they're not all the same. Excuse me. Alrighty, so first things first, once you are in the object mode, we have to go to the wrench over here, add a modifier, deform, displace, and now comes the specificity part that helps so much. So this is going to be called the back displace. We're going to add a new texture, call it the back texture. We're going to apply this to UV, back. Actually, we're just going to call this blank texture. Let's see why. We're going to add a new modifier, deform, displace, front displace. We're going to hit this down arrow. We're going to type in blank texture, or I'm sorry, select blank texture. You'll see a little 2 pops up. That's important. Coordinates are going to be UV map. And this one, as you guessed it, is going to be the front displacement. So once you have that, you have your template. So instead of short smooth, it's going to be short template. All right, double click that, change its name. So now we've got something that we can apply a whole bunch of times. So click on it over here. I'm going to move it off to the side. Control C, Control V, G, and I think I'm going to hit the X button. Yeah, and then we're going to just choose a spot. Boom. Control V, G, X, put it there. Control V, G, X, put it there. Cool. All right, so I'm going to click on that. I'm going to hide it with the H key, H key, H key. All right, so let's do this guy first. We'll call him, I don't know, let's do Hawaiian, right? We've got them talk about Hawaiian. So first things first, Mr. Hawaiian. This is blank texture. I'm going to call this Hawaiian back. I'm going to go to the, see how these are blue when I select them? Click on back, this one up here. I'm going to go to the texture menu. You'll see that back displace is already selected. If I go up here and I click on front, I go to texture. Doesn't switch. You can't select them going into it. There's a drop-down menu where you choose which one's which. So we're going to work on the back one first. We're opening up the Hawaiian back texture file by hitting open. We're going to find our picture. I'm sure it's like right around here. All right. As you can see, it seemingly applied perfectly to the whole gun. That's just not true. You could argue that this leaf is way too big. Everything in the front looks really nice. We need to separate them out. So what we're already on right now is the back displace. So we could increase the number of repeats and get it down to a more acceptable size. We'll say for just sake of argument that that's exactly what I wanted. That's perfect. We just need to change some of its strengths. We're going to go to the modifiers here. And for the back displace, we want to change the mid-level. I recommend with the mid-level, only certain textures need something between 0 and 1. Most of the time, it's going to be perfect for a full maximum 1, and you walk it out to a negative that you like. Or a full 0, and then you walk it out to a positive that you like. There isn't one right answer. It has to do with how many blacks and whites or brights and darks your picture has. That will determine what's right for you. What I urge you to do when you decide what's right for your mid-level is look at it from the side view. See what your texture is actually doing. By side view, I mean like this part right here along the edge. When I start messing with that mid-level at a 0.4 strength, it basically is like telling it where the starting point is. This one down here says, let's have it all be relative to this guy, which means that the whole thing's technically dropping in, which means the whole thing's technically getting close to your interior geometry. Maybe with this one it's okay, but what if I need it to be a little bit more pronounced? There we go. That's the pronunciation that I actually want. And it's getting dangerously close to my actual like model geometry. So just urge caution on, well, I don't want it to get too big or whatever. Like, sure, maybe it's not too big, but now your model's going to fall apart or it's not going to slice right. So I love trying to make 0 work whenever I possibly can with a positive. because it never takes away any material. It only adds some. You just have to make sure that you don't have too many like aggressive weirdnesses off to the side. Anyway, we're going to say that's perfect. We're going to say that's exactly what this one needed to be, which it's not. Just to be clear, that resolution is not very good. But we're going to pretend, just to move on, that 0.5 and 0 are perfect for this. Now, on the front over here, we'll mimic it. We'll do 0.5 followed by 0. And it's all like tiny and scrunched, and it doesn't match. So we're going to go to this texture menu, and we're going to select the front one. So we're going to say, what the heck, man? We need you to be more forgiving. So what we're going to do is when you see this number, it says display number of users of this data, which is a quantity of times that this particular selection has been applied to its knowledge. So by clicking it, it disconnects it, iterates a number at the end, and then it puts it down here for the number of times that that picture applies. So we're going to change the picture settings next by making it single user as well. And then now I can undo that, make it 1 and 1, and bring them back to relatively matching. Now there's more detail that goes into fitting that, but for the sake of conversation, we're going to say that that's perfect. We're going to say that that's exactly what we wanted, and it's not far off. It really isn't. It's not egregious. But we're going to say that it's good, and that is how we separate out a texture from a front to a back within the same frame. So, as promised, we're going to go to this, finish it off, and go to Generate, Decimate. We're going to invert our remesh by doing 0.18, hitting Enter, and we're going to keep an eye on our face count over here and see it drop. That's how we know that it's done decimating. Friendly reminder, if you are doing really, really large frames with more detail than this, a decimation is a great time to step away and get some water or whatever. There are times where I've had such complex frames that I've had to do decimations that last, gosh, almost 10 minutes. This is a relatively low resolution change that we're making. Again, relatively. So just don't be down on yourself. If you hit that button, it takes forever. I expect it to take forever most of the time, and I'm pleasantly surprised when it takes less than a minute. Pretty wonderful. This is not ready to export, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit the eye over here and hide it. We're going to open up the next one. We're going to hide this guy and hide this guy. And here's our next one. Our next one, we're going to apply a different texture to. So, excuse me. We have a front displace and a back displace. On the front displace, we're going to have to go find a texture for it. So we're going to click on the texture icon. And we're going to want to go to Open. And we're going to want to pick a new texture. For this one, what we're going to want to do is something that it achieves what's called visual parity, where when you have that little separation line that we have in between, if you have things that are supposed to line up, you have, like, I'm going to use brick, for example. Brick's supposed to line up with one another. If you have big bricks here and small bricks here, that's weird. But also, if they're pointing in the wrong way or they're not lining up the right way, it also takes away from it visually, right? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab brick. I'm going to show you what we mean. First and foremost, we don't want it to be vertical. We want it to be horizontal. So how do we fix that? In the texture menu, there's a flip axis button. And look at that. It flips the axis beautifully. As I mentioned, we've got small bricks and large bricks. Actually, I'm already liking the way that the large bricks look. So we're going to tweak them a tiny bit, and we're going to move on to the fixing the front ones. And when I say tweak, what I mean is there's other settings in here that control how big or small it is. Now, like I said, I quite like the way that this one already looks, so I don't want to change it too much. This brick isn't lined up with this hole very well. This one's lined up a little bit better, but it's too off to the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to fix this one first by using the minimum XY and the maximum XY until I like the way that it looks. Like that. That's going to center it. And this one is going to stretch it out. I'm going to flip us over and see how close it is. Oh no, it's nowhere near close enough. We're going to scoot it on over a bunch more. We're going to see if we can move this the other way and say, all right, that one's like good now. How's this one? That one's good too. We just scooted it a little bit without changing too much about it. Now we have this whole issue with this small one on the front not matching at all. Now, yes, I could have just changed the number of repeats like we did in the previous one and gotten kind of close. But let's say you don't want to be close. Let's say you want it to be like perfect. That's the case. Once you get this one set up correctly, you want to switch it over. Sorry, we were looking at the back one, which was fine. So the front one we're on now. We have been on because they were both the same. We're going to click on the 2 and the 2. So now all the changes that I make to it are only going to apply to the front one because we have it named correctly. So I'm going to pick a brick. I'm going to focus on this line right here. I'm going to focus on this line right here as I start to move these. So first and foremost, let's see if we can just expand it out. See, that one's kind of close, but now it's getting a little too big, right? And this one's definitely too small. So what we can do, since what I'm doing is I'm messing with the X minimum. Once I mess with the X minimum, then we mess with the X maximum and pull it the opposite direction. So what that's doing is it's choosing the direction that anchors and the direction that shifts. Right. So you have this one's pulling it up, and this one is pulling it down. Right. I hit undo twice. Hopefully, maybe not. All right. Well, we're gonna fix it manually. Zoom in and out some. See, I don't like that these aren't lining up correctly. It is definitely worth getting them correct. And there isn't going to be like an easy one-way catch-all. You're going to find that some of them line up great, some of them don't line up at all, and you just need to keep messing with your sizing until it shifts correctly. Sometimes you'll end up having to scoot the whole image until everything lines up the way you want it to. See, now that's getting dangerously close to where I want it to be. Yeah, that's probably about what I would say is perfect, at least from the X perspective. Not so much over here, but we can probably fix that with the Y. So the left side looks great. The right side looks just fine. Now we've lined them up together. They match. And now it's just a question of going back to our modifier, figuring out a strength that we like and a direction that we like. Like I said, pick a mid-level that works for you. That one's going to be mortar out. This one's going to be brick out. So if I go mid-level all the way down, then it's going to be brick out, brick in. You'll also notice, by the way, that the more strength you give this, the more aggressive your texture is. So if you have a very smooth, boring texture, it can withstand a lot of strength increase. Whereas very detailed textures like this, they'll get really hairy really quickly. So we're just going to pick a number that we like. I think that's fine. Whatever that is, what was that? 1 and 0. Change this to a 0. Call it a day. Then they match. So this one's ready to export. So again, match, add modifier, generate, decimate, 0.18. And that's going to immediately start undoing the remesh value that we set in the sculpt mode. And you should have all of your metrics enabled down here on the bottom where you can keep track of what the face count is. Basically, whenever you start doing your decimation, everything kind of freezes while it remaps the entire model. So without the ability to track how many faces you have, there's nothing you can like click on without breaking. It doesn't break, but you can't see that it's working in the background. It's all frozen. Seeing that number gives you a progress report. So that guy's done, and we have 2 of them complete. We'll do another one now. Let's do a fun one. We're going to highlight all these, hit H. Now, let's say you want to do micro textures are becoming increasingly popular, little teeny tiny ones. And those little teeny tiny ones are not the most fun to make. If you're big into Photoshop, there's repeating texture tools built into it that I would urge you to look into. However, the most important thing here is less is more. And by that I mean when you start applying textures, you want that texture to be very, very simple, very, very primitive. And it's going to look really stupid big until you maximize the number of repeats a ton. So let's start with the back here. The back texture, the back displacement, blank texture, open. There's just one in particular that I've been using. I called it dots or something like that. Yeah, texture dots. It doesn't look like anything huge like this, right? But when I come into my repeats, I change it to 50 and 50. That becomes a little bit more appealing. That's still a little big, so we're going to go to 55, 55. Then we're going to go to our wrench. We're going to see what that looks like, not sticking out like crazy on the back displace. And we're going to make our mid-level a full 0. Yeah. Full 0 mid-level with this thing cutting little dots in is the equivalent, for example, to taking a soldering iron to it and just pushing in a little stipple pattern over and over and over. Right now, this is still pretty big. This will feel nice and tacky, but it's not gonna seem very polished. We're probably gonna want to go ahead and increase that to, let's try 60 and 60. 60 and 60 is not bad. Let's try 70 and 70. Yeah, I think 70 and 70 is going to be our money there for what's the correct number of circles for an area, a given area. That's going to just look and feel like a nice, gritty OEM texture. Now, this one over here, this is no bueno. This is not what you want. So we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to separate them out by going to the modifier so that we see that front displace and back displace are the names we're looking for. Change it to front displace. Separate it by clicking the number and clicking the number. Go to the front. We're going to drop the repeats down. 50-50. I recommend getting an absolute view and seeing both of them at the exact same time. We can see that it's still pretty big. Let's try 40-40. 40-40. I would say the 40-40 is a little big, but pretty close. Let's go to like 43-43. There we go. I think 43 is probably the closer comparison to both of these. And we got a little bit of skewing down here on the bottom. Up top, where your hand's actually going to be. I think that's pretty close. Get an absolute view over here. Yeah, we're going to go with 43. Okay, so we're going to go back to the wrench over here. And we liked the back, which was negative 0.4 and 0. And try that, negative 0.4 and 0. I say that because sometimes different textures, different surfaces, different amounts of rounding will or will not like the strength and mid-level settings that you've chosen. So don't assume that they're always going to work. These are just 2 very simple front texture, back texture scenarios. So with that, you don't really have to worry about it. It's whenever you have things that are like seams or going over large stretches of space versus small stretches of space, that's where that'll come into play. So we're going to say that we like this texture. It's ready to go. We're going to go to the wrench, add modifier, generate decimate, 0.18. And we're going to begin that arduous process of watching the verts and the faces count down. It's not fun waiting, thinking your computer's frozen. I'm going to knock on wood when I say this, but I've never had a decimation lead to anything like crashing or breaking. It's never like overworked it or whatever. It's just slower than I'd like for it to be. So let's open everything back up and let's start some namings correctly. So we've got double click, dots. We have brick. We already have Hawaiian named, and we have our template. So what I'm going to do, this is a pretty useful tool. We're going to make sure our decimations are in place, clicking through them, 0.8, 0.8, 0.8. Okay, so those are all done. This one does not have one because it's our template. We're going to go ahead and hide that. What we're going to do is we're going to highlight these three. And to show that they're done, we're going to go to File, Export, STL. We're going to dump them out on the desktop here. And we're going to say Bishop Group. And we're going to go to Selection Only. But because we're doing 3 of them at once, what we want to do, select that again, is go to the batch mode and select Object. It'll take those names and it'll apply them correctly in the desktop. It's currently exporting. As you can see, I've got dots, Hawaiian, brick. Let's take a look, do a visual inspection. It's a terrible view. There we go. All right, they are ready to go. Beautiful. All right, so that covers all the basics of texturing. The other things that I wanted to mention apply to different styles of model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of this. I actually don't even really need this template anymore. So we're going to start from fresh. I'm going to close out of this entirely, and we're going to reopen Blender, brand new, nice and fresh. For reference, just because some people have things applied differently, I am currently on No, why would they have a super easy about? I'm on Blender 4.0. I was hoping for a an obvious like here's my actual version screen. Save system info. All right, well apparently that's above them. I'm on 4.0.2. So that's the version I'm on in case the things don't apply correctly for you. So we're going to import STLs. Now we are going to go back to that more complex one from earlier, and I'm going to show you why. We also, if you didn't listen to the ADHD version, you're going to learn something new. So equally useful for you. We're going to go to the Black Pawn L, STL blank. Now, selfishly, I need to make some more of these anyway, because it's going to be the next thing I'm going to be printing in nylon, so it needs to happen. But still, we need to have textures on relevant complex things that have multiple faces needing to be textured. So we're going to texture this piece, and this whole back piece all kind of at the same time. And that's where the naming really starts to come in. We got a request from one of the students to apply textures to multiple things at once. This isn't multiple bodies at once necessarily. The concepts apply, and I'll call them out as I get to those steps. But this is going to touch on why you would want to do things this way. So first and foremost, we're going to do our normal thing. We're going to go to edit mode. We're going to go to face select. We're going to see that it's not enough resolution. We're going to go to sculpt mode. 0.18, enter, click on remesh. See our faces jump up like crazy. Go to edit mode. See that we are good to go. Good to get started, I mean. We're going to do an absolute view. We're going to take our box selection tool. We're going to highlight all this down here. Now, I didn't make a vertex group yet because you don't technically have to yet. You can have the selection here when you go to start doing that. No, you don't have to get it as perfect as I just did. It just happened to work out well. All right, so let's see how far that gets us. I'm gonna grab this one more edge and then we'll do it. Yeah, sure. We'll see what that does. Select linked flat faces. Yeah, we definitely didn't get anywhere near as much as we wanted. We can get away with some pretty good shit when it comes to the Control Plus tool. So let's do a countdown. Control Plus 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to -4 because we know that it'll bring this bottom lip into where we need it to be. So Control -1, 2, 3, and then 4. Now that's doing a pretty good job. Now, as I mentioned to you guys before, I'm going to mention it again. You don't want it to be on the exact edge. You want it to back it off some. So we're going to hit Control- again. Get a nice clean break all along this. Now with that clean break, we're going to come in here and do some more selections. Don't get me wrong. We're not going to get all the way up to the edge. We're going to stay one away from the edge. Even with this stuff right here, where I have some, if I really, really care about the model, I'm going to hold down Control. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to unselect them. Having that clean break really helps from the bullshit spilling off to the sides and putting textures where it just doesn't benefit you to have textures. And then this one, you want it to be exact. Take a little bit of time. And I warned the class about this at the beginning of the video. Don't sit here and feel like you have to have every single polygon correct. The printer resolution just won't achieve it. Most manufacturing resolution just won't achieve it. You have to get into a whole bunch of subtractive manufacturing technologies for injection molding before you start getting into these teeny tiny bits that matter. So I would urge you not to stress about these little tiny extra ones along the edge, like all this. Just don't worry about it. It's never gonna matter. It'll matter to you only because you can see it right here in front of your face with a very powerful tool able to see all of this resolution. It doesn't matter. And I promise you, I'm just as guilty. I'm doing it right now while I'm talking to you about not doing. I'm sitting here cleaning up things that I know don't matter. We're all guilty of it. Just try not to let yourself do too much. Because that Control Plus and Control minus, they're gonna do most of the work for you anyway. I am gonna clean this up. This is worth talking about another tool. Holding down the select box and then going to select circle, cranking up this radius some, and then holding down the Control key allows you to select an unselection. That way you're not putting textures where you don't want them. Right there. Now, similarly, the circle tool can be very helpful for edging in a couple like weird curves. If I hold down the shift key, I can sit here and I can paint them in one at a time without using the awkward box tool. Is it necessary? No. No, it's not. None of this is necessary. All right, I'm going to peel myself away from this because it's not necessary. We're going to go to the Data, Object, Data Properties tab. We're going to add a vertex group. We're going to call it the grip. And we're going to hit assign, but we're not going to unwrap it. Now, this is the part that you would have missed if you skipped the ADHD section. So we're going to touch on that real quick. We're going to flip over to the select box utility. We're going to get it as big as we possibly can. And we're going to select the tiniest line we possibly can through where our previous selection would have been. We're going to go to UV. And we're going to mark theme. I'm gonna click off of it, and it just stays red like that, just kind of forever. That way, when I go to select for the grip, this is going to be where it cuts it. So like, imagine if I took some scissors right now, cut this. This was an orange peel wrapped around this. If I cut this and just peeled it off around the backside, that's telling it, hey, this is where the circle is going to be repeating. This is where you should be starting your texture over. You don't have to do this. This is just for the sake of class, so don't feel the need to remember this next part. But if I open up this menu by grabbing another workspace, going to UV editor, and I go to unwrap it by going to UV unwrap. It's gonna take a second. It's gonna take a second because it's assigning two-dimensional graph plotter points to a fully three-dimensional location. So that way, when we apply flat things to it, also known as pictures, PNGs, JPEGs, bitmaps, whatever, it's applying that to a three-dimensional space correctly, and that three-dimensionality is determined by the anchor point, which is where you marked your seam. If you don't have this here, it assumes that whatever has the least data is the seam, and whatever has the most data is the exterior. So for this one, for example, where my mouse is right now, right here, this would be the interior of a large sphere, and this bottom part would be this big awkward like skirt thing. So if I had like just a normal small, like the dots repeating texture pattern, it would be teeny tiny up here and get to be these big massive sweeping dots towards the bottom, which, you know, I guess could look cool. It's really not what we're going for here with guns, so maybe maybe use seams. Seams also don't just apply to perfect circles. This is something I really failed to expound on in the previous recording. Seams also apply to non-standard jut outs of a texture. Now, this one happens to be perfectly flat faces where the jut outs are, and I'm using my mouse to indicate where I'm talking about, like right here. If this, just using your imagination, if this orange part continued forward some more and, like, I don't know, wrapped into the trigger guard area and went forward some and then in some, like, you'd want to consider putting another seam, like where my mouse tip is right here, up to like there or something. That says, hey, feel free to cut this and like flatten it out too. So like basically cutting it up into sections. The UV editor shows us that our unwrap is exactly what we wanted it to be. So that's fantastic. Again, I don't know why it puts the seam mark where it does, but it feels the need to put it there, and you know, there's no negative ramification to it thinking that it's this weird line right here. It's just always done that, so I'm sorry if I don't have a good explanation as to why that is. We're gonna right click, we're gonna close this area. I'm gonna add some more vertex groups. As I mentioned, this is going to be for multiple textures on a single frame. So double click this guy, column right. Double click this guy, column left. So we're gonna do the left selection. Very, very easy. We can just select a box like this, select linked flat faces, and it's gonna do like all of it for us. I mean, virtually all of it. The fact that it's not grabbing it all perfectly instantly the first time tells me I probably left. Yeah, I think I left that selected when we came in, so it's okay. It's fine. It's just that's why it didn't work right away. I do have some little mess here, so I'm going to hit Control plus once, then Control minus. I'm going to do another Control minus. See if we can't get that to clean up just a smidge. With this one in particular, just because I've tried printing it already, I don't mind this one coming up to the edge because it's a pretty soft edge. But if you have one that you're on the fence about and you're not sure about, go ahead and hit that Control minus and bring it in just one more. It's just not worth going through all this effort, going through an unwrap, then having your texture just puke spiky crap off to the sides. it can be very discouraging. You really want the flat one. And in saying that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave it like this. I know that this Control Plus isn't close enough to the edge to cause a problem, but it's my release. I'm going to practice what I preach, and we're going to do it this way. That said, I am going to clean up just this itty bitty, teeny tiny bit because it's like a perfect line, and it's not a big deal to do. I'll start like right here, holding down Shift, and we'll just clean up that little line, and we'll call it good. So this is left. We're going to hit Assign, click Out, click Select again, make sure it got selected, and nothing else got selected. Okay. Then we're going to go ahead and hit UV and unwrap, and it's very tiny, so it's going to be nearly instant. Then we're going to do this one over here. We're going to select this guy. Yeah, we'll select it like that. That way we get all the flat faces and the curved faces at once, making sure nothing else is selected. And we're going to go to Select, Linked, Flat Faces. They should grab like the whole thing again. I'm not sure why this select linked flat faces on this teeny tiny little face is being a bugger, but apparently it thinks that it needs to be emotional. And we're going to hit Control -1 time and get it nice and on the interior. And this is going to be on the right one. We're going to hit Assign, click off, hit Select, see it come back up. Make sure that it's selected, nothing else is selected. UV, unwrap. And we're all done with the unwraps and the selections. We can hop back on over to the object mode. Now I'm going to pick a texture here that I know that I personally enjoy. It's a smaller repeating texture, but it's going to cover why you want to address different pieces with a different tact. So we're going to do our normal thing, modifier, add, deform, displace. We're going to call this the home grip space displace. We're going to do a new texture. We're going to call it, oh gosh, I don't have a name for it. Well, I'll just call it grip texture for now, and we'll pick a texture and then we'll name it UV grip. We're going to go to texture. We're going to go to open. We're going to go to my big folder of textures, and we're going to just pick one of the smaller ones that I've made. Smaller, simple things like this do wind up creating some pretty cool little textures, just so you're aware. Like this thing, if I crank this out to 60 and 60, you get some really cool repeating textures out of it. Keeping in mind that also changes when you fuck with your mid-level and your strength. Almost feels like a completely different texture. So don't rule something out right away. Mess with those settings just a smidge and see if you like them or don't like them. This one in particular, I do like, but the way that I like it is not like this. It's repeating in a weird way at a 2x1. We'll do like 30 and 80. Maybe 20. And we'll flip the axis. 80, 20. 40. Yeah, we'll go with a nice little horizontal texture. Something that's going to be a bit more receptive to the grip coming in from the back towards the front. It's going to be a micro texture, but it's not going to be tacky and aggressive. Now, I want to match that to the front. So we're going to call this, yeah, we'll leave it at grip texture for now, because we're not doing multiple textures. We're just doing one frame. We're going to go to the wrench. We're going to add a modifier, a deform, displace, and we're going to call this one the right displace, grip texture, UV map. This is the right. As you can see, it's all messed up as we assumed it would be. Now, what I'm going to do We're going to go to texture. We're going to go to right displace, and we're gonna separate it out like we did before. But this time, what we're going to do is we're going to call it side texture rather than right. And we're going to separate it out. We're going to make this like 40 and 20, maybe like maybe a lot less, 20 and 20, 10 and 10. Sheesh. Also, if you don't want to play guess the number, and you have like a visual here, you can just grab this number in the middle and drag the mouse until you like what you're looking at. Save yourself some time. Yeah, this one will work. This doesn't have to be anything super wild. We're gonna have to mess with those sizes like crazy though. All right, so let's go back and we'll see what we had before. For grip, it was negative 0.4 and 0, minus 0.4, tab 0. As you can see, it got pretty close to what we were looking for. But getting in there and looking at it and knowing contextually what we're looking at, it's just an added like grip pad. It can be cut in pretty hardcore. So if you decide you want to get a little froggy with that one, if you know what you're working with is not picky to how deep it's gonna be, man, fucking go for it, right? Once you've got that, then we can go ahead and do a modifier. And we can cheat. We can hit this little down arrow right here. We can go to duplicate and call it the left displace and change it from right to left. And then just do all the exact work for us right then and there. And it just kept them both. Saves a ton of time and allows you to go through. And let's say I had like 8 of these along this and like 1 down here. If they were all the same size and shape, relatively speaking, you'd be able to just boom, 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 rapid fire, do a whole bunch of them without having to mess with the texture. And you can just duplicate them, keeping the same strength and mid-level, just saving yourself tons of time. So we'll call this one good to roll. And we should be able to go ahead and do our add modifier. Generate, decimate, 0.18, enter. And as I said, keep your eye on the face count on the bottom because that should tell you whether or not it's still working. If you make the mistake of clicking on this while it's decimating, it'll probably either like give you the thinking wheel or gray out the application. That's normal. Let it keep doing that. It'll still continue working through decimation and complete. Just be aware that it likes to react that way sometimes, and it's just part of it. All right, we're done. So we can go ahead and click on this guy, File, Export, STL. And we're going to go to STL Exports. Way too many designs. Black Pawn L, STL. And instead of dots, we're going to call this squares. Selection only, even though there's only one selection. It's just good practice to do selection only. I will hit Export STL. Let's go take a look at it. 37 megabytes. And we're good to go. Exactly what I hope to see. Matching on both sides. Beautiful. All right. So really, that covers the vast majority of what you should know, the buttons you should be messing with, the things that you need in order to be successful. Keeping in mind that you do have imperfections with a seam, but you can use your minimum, maximum, XY inside of your texture settings to really fine tune these and get these to be nearly invisible. When you start getting small textures, like itty bitty, like sandpapery textures and stuff like that, you don't even see the seam anymore. It completely like erases it. It's the big, pretty, pronounced textures that they go away with. So anyway, that should cover everything you need. It's really not that complex. Once you get some practice and some reps in, should be good to go. And if you have any other questions for me, this is going to be on my YouTube for the Gun Academy YouTube channel, as well as my Unseen Killer Odyssey. So feel free to leave some comments for me. Feel free to reach out to me in the Gun Academy Discord itself. We try to have classes as close to every Friday as possible. Always happy to field some questions there whenever we can. But other than that, thanks for attending, and I hope you learned something.